Can't hear you at the moment, but you're muted for some reason.
Now, okay, now am I good?
Perfect.
Okay.
We have 111 people in the waiting room. Do we have to admit everybody?
Yeah, it's like a new thing from,
Oh, right. I saw that.
yeah, so here I can admit them. And I'll check too. Great. Hi, everyone.
Hello. Got the season finale of Yellowstone tonight. I'm really excited. I know it sounds a little ridiculous, but I really love that show. It's pretty good. I'm not really a TV guy, but I've been more into that, I guess, recently with this whole new world we live in.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to give everybody like a few more minutes because we had a lot of people sign up and a lot of people are just clicking in. So but I'll just do I'll do some little bit of housekeeping while we're waiting for more people to show up. First of all, I'm Debbie Schwartz. I manage Rhodes College and the Paying for College 101 group. Hopefully, you've seen me around already through some other stuff that we do, but it's nice to see everybody here tonight. And I'm here with Russ Vitale, and his name is saying Concierge Services because Russ manages a lot of the services that we provide and also runs a concierge service that we've been doing for the past 2 years. We have a lot to go through tonight. And so my housekeeping comments are everybody's been brought in muted, but we love doing these meetings kind of in this way and not actually webinars because it's nice to see everybody. And it also gives you the chance, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, we are fine with that. Just when you're not talking, keep it muted because otherwise we and everybody here can hear a lot of the background noises. This is recorded and tomorrow we will send out a link, an email with a link to the recording. So if you want to watch it again, you want to share it with somebody else, you want to share it with your student, that's fine. Actually, and that's another thing, if you want your student to sit in tonight, that's great. Go get them. Like tell that this is for parents and students. So if you want to have them listen, if you can drag them to sit next to you, go for it. We'd love to have them here as well.
They shouldn't be going anywhere else, so they should be there.
Right. And just on like a personal note, Russ and I also actually have students who are high school seniors. So we are going through this too. I just had a talk with my own son who wanted to go and do something for the next, I don't know, a few weekends. And I was like, hold on, buddy, we got to make sure we get all your college stuff done. So I just say that is that, we are in here with you going through it in our own houses. So we know exactly what's going on, especially in this year, which is so different than many other years.
Yeah, yesterday I spent out on my deck with my daughter going through her supplements and her list and all that kind of happy jazz. So right there, it's so weird, so odd doing it for your own child this time though, but it's kind of cool.
Right. Okay, so tonight, we thought we would do this, session because for the past few weeks, we've been focusing a little bit on essays, and whenever we've been doing these type of sessions, we've gotten a lot of questions just about general stuff related to the admissions process. Again, not surprising. It is a crazy year, right? So we thought we would kind of try and hit some of the highlights of what we think people are most concerned about, that we're seeing a lot of questions. And so that's why we put this session together. And some people sent in questions, which we kind of summarized because they also hit common themes. So I think you'll get a lot of information tonight. And again, feel free if you want to kind of stop, raise your hand, say, I have a question about that. That's all what tonight's about.
And then we also have the chat too. The chat, they can put their questions in there as well. Because after we do a conversational, as one of us are talking, the other one's kind of checking through the questions that are submitted as we go through. So hopefully we'll answer as much of that as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, use the chat. So with that, I'm going to share my screen, and we have some slides, and we can get started.
Uh-oh.
Oh, you can't see it?
No, it says uh-oh. I just figured.
Oh, okay.
I just figured for a fact I would emphasize the point.
Okay. But you can see the screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so do you want to get started, Russ?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Russ Vitale. As Debbie said, I've been working with Debbie now for going on 3 years on different things, but the concierge service is what I manage for Road to College. I've been an independent college admissions counselor and advisor for going on into my 16th season right now. And I do have a daughter who is a high school senior as well. And I am a published author, wrote a book on the subject. So, right now we call this kind of our senior sprint right now. And if you have a senior, you've had summer and time to do some things. Hopefully you did. But I actually started things with my students a little earlier this year. Usually we started in May, I'm sorry, in June. But this year I started in May because I figured students are home, they have a little extra time. So you might be feeling a little bit of pressure at this point, and I understand. Students, I feel bad for the seniors. The class of 2020, I feel bad for as well. But right now, I feel bad for the seniors because life is a lot different. Getting them motivated at this point is a little difficult. I don't know what the status is of most of you going back to school or not, and doing virtual and all those kind of things. It's hard. It's hard. But the only thing I'll say is that, right now is the critical time. They need to get their essays, finalize their list. You're going to have financial aid to do with after October 1st. So there's a lot of things to get done. And I think if you have the right guidance and you just try to break it down into small pieces and just knock out one thing at a time, I think you'll be fine. But the bottom line is it is a sprint, and they kind of clicked off the gun, if you will. It has started. So I'm sure at this point, the last time we did one of these talks, Debbie, I think it was right after the Common App and the Coalition App were released on August 1st. So yeah. Now it's, the admission dates are approaching quickly. Some schools are already open for rolling admissions, which we'll discuss in a little bit. Early decision, early action dates are typically in the October 15th to November 15th kind of time frame, sometimes a little later, but I know that seems like a long ways away, but with school starting and all those kind of things, especially if you have multiple children, it's going to be here before you know it. So we're going to try to give you some tips and try to give you some guidance here that will hopefully help you to successfully navigate this process. So thought we would just kind of recap things. You want to make sure your students' college list is realistic. Debbie has this thing with me that she says there are some Russisms that I use, and she's right. It's in my book as well. But I always say the college list drives everything, and that sounds obvious, but a lot of students put a list together based on sometimes the wrong criteria. They're worried about what everybody else is doing. They worry about ratings and rankings. They're worried about, making it seem like they're applying to, competitive enough schools. And, then you also have, as a parent, the financial side of things. So you really want to make sure that the college list is accurate based on the ambitions and financial goals that you and your family are looking for, but also realize that that drives the schedule as far as when to apply and also the work that needs to be done before you apply. SATs and ACTs, I mean, it has been absolutely a nightmare. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be honest with you, my students back in April, I pretty much told all the students that I work with directly to stop doing any kind of standardized testing prep. I had a feeling that a majority of the tests are going to be canceled, and they have been. And schools by school, they just keep canceling them. And I don't honestly, I don't know about you, Deb, but I don't know one school that has not gone SAT optional in some capacity.
I think the only ones maybe that still haven't, there's some state schools where like the state hasn't approved it.
Yeah, well, you know what? And I've heard that too, but I've had my students call on a couple of those, and they actually said that they are going they just haven't announced it yet.
Okay.
So I just think, I think it'd be pretty callous and unfeeling of these schools to, to at least not provide the option for students, because these students are stressed out about it, and it's not for lack of preparation, not for lack of desire. So, should you try to still take them, we'll discuss that a little bit. But that's definitely something that's very stress.
Yeah, Aurora is mentioning, and the Florida schools are still not test optional. I think the Georgia schools are not too.
Well, so that's interesting, because I had a student call University of Florida and call, Tampa, and they're both test optional this year. They both are going test optional. So I think don't look for announcements. I would call, because that's really important, because that's a lot of stress for students right now, not to mention the time, effort, and money that you spend in preparation for something that might not happen. So when in doubt, as I always say, always call. Like I tell my students all the time, this is not a Snapchat machine. It's actually a phone. You can actually call and talk to people, and they should probably do that. Many schools have gone test optional, but you need to understand what that means. Because it's test optional doesn't mean it's easier to get into. So we'll talk about a little bit about that. In my opinion, I've always, for 16 years now, I've always made the essays a very, very critical part of my process, because, a lot of students with transcript and activities and application wise and all those things, they look, and it's not that, this is a bad thing, but especially, and by the way, at any school, but especially I was going to say at a school that might be a reach for your student. And I'm not just talking about the most selective schools in the country. I'm talking about every student has the potential to apply to reach schools, depending on where they are academically, okay? And they probably should, to some degree, apply to reach schools. But test optional makes this, if you take that criteria away, it makes the essays and the supplemental essays even more important than they were before. So it's really important to answer those questions and really be engaging and have a kind of a plan when you're doing those kind of things. The deadlines are really important too. We'll talk a little bit about this in a little bit more detail. Early decision is something that you can definitely consider. I think a lot of colleges are going to be looking to accept even more students than they did before early decision, to get you to commit, because I think they're taking a financial hit. But you have to really make sure that that's right for you, your student, and your family before you commit to something like that. And then I'm sure everybody's heard that there's some new optional Covet essays, and there's a lot of debate as to whether or not you should or shouldn't discuss them. I think it's pretty simple to decide, but we'll discuss that as well. So, right on cue, let's talk about those Covet essays. So just, there's two Covet essays. It's really interesting, Debbie. One of the folks in our concierge group emailed me and said, my guidance counselor has no idea what you're talking about as far as the Covet essay is concerned. I'm like, it's right on the Common App. So she's like, wow, I can't believe I had to educate them on that. So, there's two. There's an optional essay for the student to write, which is 250 words. And there's also something that guidance could submit on behalf of your high school that kind of explains how your high school has gotten through, addressed, and worked through the whole COVID situation. So we'll talk about the student one in a second, but to me, I really think that you as a parent should ask your high school how they plan on responding to that. And you should take a look at that and see that. You should be able to see it, because it affects your student and what is being communicated regarding your student and their academic experience.
Because that's the way, Russ, right? If some schools made different decisions last spring about whether they were going to go pass fail, or whether how they were going to do their grades. And that's where that's going to be communicated.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where it should be communicated, right? But also, if your high schools have experienced any difficulty regarding, connectivity, technical issues, any of those kind of things, it would be much better coming from guidance than coming from a student, obviously. So that's one part. But the other thing is, and there's a lot of folks out there that, apparently work with students on a college essay basis, and that's great and that's awesome. But a lot of people, I think, have been using this kind of as a carrot for business. And I actually don't think that people should be doing that, because I actually think most students probably should not be responding to the COVID question. If you read the COVID question specifically, it sounds like, they're really looking for, and by the way, I sat in on a Common App training. I've also talked to multiple admissions people, and they're really not looking to hear about the unfortunate circumstances of, not being able to participate in a internship, missing out on prom, not being able to test, those kind of things, because everybody has been impacted in that way. And actually, if your child's been on the Common App and you've checked it out with them, there are a lot of schools that have asked, do you intend to go SAT optional? And if so, was it due to a lack of ability or availability of a test? So that's what I would have done if I were a college. I think that's a no-brainer. I think that way you can just easily categorize people. But I don't think colleges, as a matter of fact, I know that colleges don't want to get 5,000 essays on the fact that they weren't able to test. Okay, so really when you answer the COVID question, it should be more, if you are very seriously affected or impacted, which I hope none of you have been, but for health reasons, for financial reasons, for lack of availability, again, of technology or those kind of things, or if you have done something really, really significant to help to stand up for, to support the efforts in your community, then that would be a question I might consider answering. But other than that, I honestly would stay away from that as much as possible.
Okay, so just to clarify, Russ, I'm just looking at some of the questions.
Sure.
Lisa said she's a little confused. Does the school automatically respond to the COVID question? Maybe just clarify again that there's two questions.
Both of those questions are optional. Okay, they're optional for the student and they're optional for the guidance counselor or for school to reply or respond to. Personally, I feel that every high school should probably have a response to how they've handled COVID and provide it. Now, they also, though, may choose a different way to do it, because remember, every high school sends their profile to the colleges that your students are applying to. They might alter and edit their profile to include that kind of information potentially. But I would at least ask. Both questions are optional, and I think I would go to your guidance department in your high school and just ask what their intentions are. And if they do plan on responding, I would want to see a copy of what they said.
And Rachel's asking kind of a little bit, I guess, the opposite, meaning that what if actually she felt that the school became more rigorous because of going online? Do you think that they should detail that in their COVID response?
Well, I don't know that a school is going to admit that they become more rigorous as a result. I mean, and also that would be interesting. That's probably a whole nother conversation. I'd like to understand what that even means. I mean, I think that, and we've talked about on the coffee clutch, Debbie, and other things that we've done, we've talked about, I know there's a lot of negative things surrounding the fact that everybody went virtual and you're at home and all that kind of stuff. But I have to say, I do see kind of a silver lining with this a little bit. College readiness is something where a lot of students really struggle with. Depending on what numbers you look at, a minimum of somewhere between 42 and 51% of college freshmen either transfer or drop out, which is a national number, and that's a tremendous amount. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But one of the reasons is that they're not really ready to be able to, navigate the process and take the initiative that they need to from an academic perspective until it's too late. So I really think, I'm hoping, and I know this has happened a little bit with my own daughter, my own students to some degree. I think that they've had to become a little bit more resourceful to do the studying that they've needed to do, to find resources to help them, and actually to, again, self-regulate and self-manage. So I think that, that hopefully from a college readiness perspective has your student more ready, but I don't know as far as the rigorous aspect of that. I don't know that a high school is going to admit that. But if you feel strongly about that something's changed to make it more rigorous, I would absolutely try to have your guidance counselor, if they're not going to put it in the school response, maybe to put it in your child's specific letter of recommendation response.
And Christina's asking, she's wondering, for the student, does the Covet essay have to be like a true essay, or could it be like bullet points?
I don't think it should be bullet points unless you are going to very clearly state, the summarization of what those bullet points are for. I think it should probably be in some form of an essay, but also at the same time, that being said, you don't need to do a whole long dragging out kind of introduction kind of thing. I would get right to the point. It's more of a supplemental kind of response as you would handle the supplemental essay versus the Common App, personal statement. I think you just want to get right to the point. During this time during COVID, I was affected this way, impacted that way, or I took this initiative. Anything else? I mean, I know a lot of people are talking about it. Anything else significant on that, Deb?
Nope, not right
We
now.
can always come back to it if we need to.
Yep.
So as I said before, finalizing the college list is really, really important. So you want to make sure that the list, matches your child's admission goals, but also your family's financial goals. And finances have changed at a lot of these colleges. So, one of the major things is consideration for an honors program, which often comes with money, and or merit programs. If your child is not able to test, you might want to have your child call admissions and ask how they're going to be assessed for those types of things. I've had my students call, and most colleges give the same kind of generic answer that the fact that you do not test does not mean that you will not be considered for merit scholarships and for honors programs. They're going to go based on other things, such as obviously your GPA, the rigor of the classes that you've taken. And a lot of colleges have also asked very college specific, honor specific, or merit specific essay questions as well. Current changes could impact your admissions results. A lot of people have been so concerned and worried about, the whole gap year thing and how that's going to affect. I personally, I don't have one student. I think we've talked about this, Debbie, before, but I don't have one student of mine, either in the concierge group or that I've worked with individually, who has or will be taking a gap year. Not one. So I kind of think that's a little bit, forgive the term, but a little bit fake news at the moment. But remember also, as a result of what's going on now too, international students are being impacted as well. So I kind of feel like there could actually be a positive impact to admission results, especially at some of the more competitive schools. But at the same time, it's going to be school by school and dependent upon, what that school is going through at the time.
And there was that, I think it was Harvard, that there was that article in the past 2 weeks that kind of, personally I thought it was a little clickbaity, that kind of said 20% of students have deferred, but they never broke that down. And my gut is that a huge chunk of that 20% were international students.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, international students honestly probably have no choice at the moment, really. So I would agree with you. I actually didn't see that article, but I just think, I don't think it's going to be as impactful. And by the way, also, I think as far as the whole gap year strategy philosophy of a college, it's very school specific. And I think, they're going to give precedence to the people who are applying now and who they can get to commit now. Because even if they provide a gap year option, doesn't mean those students are going to, necessarily commit to them. You want to make sure colleges are affordable, and this is regardless of financial aid need or not. Listen, a college is an expensive investment, right? We all know that. So, being a educated college consumer, as Debbie and I always like to say, is to your advantage to make sure that you are paying, what you think is reasonable. And also, by the way, maybe doing a little negotiation at this point too, because they may be a little bit more willing to negotiate at this point than they were in the past to, secure revenues. And then obviously you want the right mix of reach, match, and safeties. And that's really, really important. I find so many students have a little bit of a misconception of what is really truly a match and a reach school. And at the same time, also, they have a little bit of a feeling that, you know, the match or safety school is kind of below them. And, you know, so a lot of times I have to spend time kind of educating them on that process to make sure that they're using the right criteria. But I'm sure all of us as parents have heard, well, if that school is giving me money, then obviously I'm too smart to go there, which is totally not true. Or they say, you know, well, that school's not a great school. Why? Well, because on the ratings and rankings, which I think are totally ridiculous and bogus personally, but I can't blame them because a lot of students don't understand how to evaluate a school. And they're caught up right now in the ego part of it and the confidence part of it, and the fact that, hey, I worked so hard these last 4 years, why would I go to that type of school, instead of seeing the big picture and understanding the percent of kids that, you know, transfer or drop out, the percent of kids that don't make it, the big fish in a small pond, and all those other things that we've talked about in the past.
So Ross, there's a question about how accurate are net price calculators?
Yeah, well, I mean, Debbie, this is your area of expertise. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, unfortunately, they may or may not be accurate. This is a little bit of my pet peeve because I feel that the government actually mandated colleges to have net price calculators on their website. Maybe, I don't know, within the past 5 years.
Yeah,
and they should have just added this little, you know, sentence, you know, that said, and they need to be accurate within a certain, you know, range. And they didn't. So so colleges meet the requirement because they have it on their website, but that doesn't mean that the information is accurate. So some are accurate and some aren't. And I guess a few little tips about how you know. First of all, the more questions they ask, the more detailed information they ask, probably you're going to get a, you know, more accurate number. If it's just like 3 or 4 questions, which some of them are, they're probably just spitting something out quickly, and they're not actually taking into account your student and where they might fall in terms of whether they're going to get money or not. Yeah. If they definitely ask for, you know, grades and maybe test scores, then they're probably incorporating, you know, some idea of merit money. But you know, bottom line is use the net price calculators as a guide. You know, nothing wrong with that. You just can't use them as, you know, 100% that's the number that you're going to get when your student gets an offer.
Well, absolutely. And by the way, I think those are all excellent points. This is no different, as I say all the time. This is no different from buying a car, from buying a business, or buying a house, right? You go online and you do these calculators and you figure it out and you say, okay, my cost should be this, or my lease amount should be this, or whatever it might be. And then you go into the dealership and you find out, whoa, wait, hold on a second. That's not the price that I saw online, right? So I think it's a directional thing. I think it's better to be educated and understand. And by the way, I advise students, and I don't know what you say about this, Deb, but I advise students and families to actually put their information in and print out
what
the output is, and then go to admissions into financial aid and say, okay, can you just validate this for me a little bit? Now, a college is not going to sign on the dotted line and say, no, you're right. This is the number you're going to get, because they reserve the right to do some judgmental and subjective kind of things, especially when it comes to merit. But it should at least give you, hopefully, a little bit more confidence that what you're looking at is accurate.
Yeah, definitely save it. I haven't really heard people getting, you know, numbers that are within a difference of $10,000. I mean, that's really far off, but it probably, the numbers are, you know, range could be 5,000 in either direction. So,
well,
you know.
I'll tell you, Deb, to that end. Last year, I had a student. The school will remain nameless, but I had a student, a family that did that and was told that they would be considered potentially for up to $18,000 of merit. And I just knew that the school, in my experience, does not provide anything near that. And we started having a conversation. And the reality is, when they actually went back to the school, they said, well, we do have scholarships that are in that amount. However, we have 3 of them. Right? I mean, out of, you know, 5,000 applicants, 3 kids are going to get it. So it can be very misleading. So you definitely want, I'm pretty sure they've removed that part of their formula, because it's very misleading. So you do need to kind of validate and vet out whatever information that you get online, for sure. Always.
So Ross, there's another question about, and this is like the, people ask this question all the time, which is fine. How many reach safety match schools should the student apply to?
Yep. So I get asked this all the time, and the answer honestly is it depends. But first off, I'll give you my universal answer that is definitely safe for everybody to try to implement. If your child has 2 reaches, 6 matches, and 2 safeties for a total of 10, you should be okay, and you should get the results that you're looking for. Now, that being said, there's a lot of stuff that depends there, okay? I mean, if financial aid is not a concern for your consideration, that's a very safe place for you to be. But if financial aid is a consideration, you might want to change that, and you might want to have more of an even spread between safeties and matches. On the other end, if you are looking for a more selective, more competitive college, because it's so subjective and it is so competitive, and if financial aid is not necessarily a driving factor for you, you might have 5 or 6 reaches, 2 or 3 matches, and 1 or 2 safeties, just to kind of equal out the opportunity, I guess, for your student to get for the subjectivity of a very competitive school. So I usually suggest about 8 to 10 schools. No more than 12. However, depending on your financial situation or what your admission or financial goals are, you could have a different mix, or you could have potentially a couple more schools added.
Wait, Russ, can you just repeat, did you mention how many you're saying for reach, match, and safety? Somebody is asking that they missed what you said.
Okay, so in general, the most safest way I can say it, not knowing what everybody's individual goals are, would be 2 reaches, 6 matches, and 2 safeties for a total of 10. Okay, so as we said, essays are critical, and even more so now. I mean, a lot of people kind of lose a lot of sleep over the letters of recommendation. I have to tell you, don't. I mean, unfortunately, it's one of the most laborious parts of the process for your student, for the teachers, for the school. You do brag sheets and all kinds of stuff, and you agonize over who you should ask. But I think it might be a little bit more important now. But at the same time, a lot of colleges have really discounted the impact of letters of recommendation, because a student is not going to get a letter of recommendation from a teacher that says, by the way, you should not admit this child, so it's a very subjective kind of thing. So I think the essays are really important, because it's the one place that your student can show a couple of things. One is show how they are different from every other applicant. 2 is, and it sounds basic, but actually make sure they actually can follow directions and answer the questions in their entirety in the word limit that is given to them. I know that sounds basic, but you'll be surprised how many students say, oh wait, but it fit. It was 650 words, but I could fit 654. That's not what you're supposed to do, okay? The other thing too is, as far as a lot of the supplements are concerned, a lot of colleges are asking very specific questions for a very pointed reason. They either want to see your students' creativity, or they want to see, what have you done to learn about our community, and what have you done to determine that you are a good fit for our community. So that's where the research, that's where answering the question in its entirety for the supplemental questions of why this school, why this major, all those kind of things are really, really important. One of the biggest mistakes that I see students make is either writing about cliche topics or having a cliche, summation of what the point of the essay is. And I'll give you an example in a minute. Or writing so much more about another person or another thing or another event or another activity that they don't have enough about them. You can almost remove that child's name and put any other child in there, and it could be anybody. So I really think that you want to really make sure it's very specific to your student, to your child, how they think, how they feel, what research they've done, what they've been involved in, how they have determined that a school is a good match, how they've determined that a major is a good match. And as far as the cliche topics, you know, and it's interesting, you know, every once in a while I get pushback on this. But you know, the sports aspect is a very cliche topic that you have to be careful about. You know, the summation or the conclusion of what your essay is about, that I learned that life is different outside of where I live. You have to be careful with those kind of conclusions because they're not deep enough. They're not there. And listen, I do have some students write some things about sports, but we phrase it and we position it in a very, very different way. And we actually talk more about the learning rather than the actual sport itself, or the fact that they won the championship, or the fact that they missed a goal, or whatever it might be. You know, and listen, you're talking to a sports guy. Like, I love sports. I am not going to tell you that there's not great life lessons that you can learn in sports. But a lot of times, you know, things like that are things that especially a lot of boys like to write about, and it doesn't differentiate your student. And a lot of times that is, you know, what will kind of breed a scanning kind of approach when essays are looked at from an admissions perspective. It sounds obvious, but optional is not optional. And yeah, I guess we borrowed from Nike there a little bit. Just do it. You know, if your child says, no, I don't have any essays because they're optional. No, you do. And especially in today's environment, you definitely want to make sure that they do them. And then the supplemental essay, like I said before, that's a way to really help you stand out, to show that you've done research. And by the way, the tone of that, except if it's a creative question, is much different from the Common App main essay, personal statement, whatever people want to call it.
So Russ, I'm just going back to actually the other slide, because there's a question here which I think is valid, and another person asked. It's related to how many colleges to apply to. If money isn't an issue, if you don't mind paying extra for the apps, and I'm assuming if time isn't an issue because it is workload, is there any downside to applying, like to maybe more than 12?
No, there's not. I mean, the only thing would be that your student obviously is going to potentially have a lot more work to do, right? As far as filling out essays, filling out supplemental questions, and all that kind of stuff. No, there's not necessarily a negative aspect to it. I get nervous though sometimes about people who want to do that, because I'm all about making sure that you're efficient as you go through the process, but also not going to create more stress and anxiety for the student than they already have going through this. So yes, you can do that, but I would be strategic with it. You do that for, I think, a specific reason of some sort.
So a lot of questions on, maybe you can give a little bit more detail about like what's that tone that you're talking about for the supplemental essays versus the Common App? Like, how do they really differ?
Yeah, so we talk about this all the time, and I know we did the essay program before, but the main essay, specifically on the Common App, there's one essay that you pick one of the several prompts, and every school gets it. That is not an English essay. That is not a research paper. That's an opportunity for your student to tell admissions in the school something special about who they are, what they think about, what's important to them, how they would stand out in a crowd, what they look like, all those kind of great things. They could be creative, it could be fun, it could be humorous. There's a bunch of different ways that you can write that essay. Really, as far as I'm concerned, there are no rules when you write that kind of a question, that kind of an essay. The supplemental essay, though, is very different. That's more in the research paperish kind of context. You don't want to be, fluffy, and you don't want to be generic. You don't want to say, well, I'm interested in the school because of the internships. Well, every school has internships. Okay. Everybody likes internships. Of course you do. From a return of investment, parents want you to get an internship, of course, right? But it's not about that. It's not about their study abroad program. It's not about the fact that they're in a city and that their rating and ranking was higher than some other school they went and visited. It's not because it's a beautiful, pretty campus. Like, that's all nice and well and good, but that doesn't show that you've done anything maybe then looked at a school online and like, okay, I think I might go there. So you want to make it more specific, and you want to match those supplemental essays to your students' experiences, to any personality traits that they have, maybe being more of a STEM person or a more humanities person versus vice versa, and those kind of things. So I think you want to make it, no fluff, no generic terms and claims, and you want to make it, match it and make it as specific as possible. Okay. The app is really, really important. I always tell my students to fill it out to the best of their ability, but I tell them we do not submit anything until your parents have printed it and reviewed it in its entirety. You want to make sure that they answer the questions well, the right way. You want to make sure, same thing, that they follow the rules and the instructions well, and they want to make sure that it kind of positions the student well in their holistic self. The activity section is something that's an opportunity to really shine. Too many students, it's funny. A lot of times a student will fill out, like you get up to 10 activities you can put in. A lot of times the student will put in 5 activities. And I'll say 5, okay, is that all you have? Like, think back, like, what have you done? Oh my gosh, that's right, I work. Oh wow, that's right, I do this or I do that. The easy things that kind of roll right off their tongue and onto the computer are, I play soccer, I play basketball, I play field hockey, whatever. But they don't, a lot of times they don't actually focus on all the other things they do. So what I actually tell them to do is, on the activity section, there's a box that you can click on and it has all the categories listed right there. I tell them to scroll one by one down and say, okay, do I have anything here that I could put in? Is there anything here that I could put? And just literally go there step by step. But the activities, and also again, unless your student is a recruited athlete, do not lead with sports. There's a way to organize and put an order to the activities. And again, it sounds like I'm bagging sports here, but I'm not. It's just that it's so cliche and it's so typical. So you want to make sure that you don't lead with that. And I understand that you've probably spent a lot of money and your students probably spent a lot of time in sports. And again, there's great life lessons. I love sports, but you want to make it a little different from the way everybody else is doing it. Should you use the Universal Common App, Coalition App, or college-specific applications? That is very school-specific. I usually have my students call and ask if admissions has a preference. But I will give you a guideline, is I would prefer not to have a student do a school-specific application if there are no essays. You have to remember, especially in today's environment, we already just talked about how significant the essays are, but sometimes colleges are just trying to feed their US World News and Report numbers, which is based on the number of applications they receive. They know that sometimes students are a little bit, dare I say, lazy. So if they say, wait, hold on, I can go on the Common App and submit it, but then I got to do 2 essays. But if I do it over here, all I have to do is, fill in some generic information and hit the submit button. It's less work for me. But that's not always the best case and the best to put them in a good position. So I would follow the advice of admissions as to which one they prefer, if they have a preference. But when in doubt, always provide more information versus less. Letters of recommendation, we talked about that. Typically, though, you have 1 from guidance and 2 from teachers. Who is really up to you and the student. It should be, in my opinion, yes, it's nice if you have 1 STEM and you have 1 humanities, but it's not necessary. You really want those letters of recommendation to be written by a teacher who's going to take the extra time, because they know your student well, to really write a very strong, solid letter of recommendation. So don't worry about rules and guidelines that other people, arbitrarily put on this stuff. Go and ask the teachers that you think know your student best and are going to write the nicest, most favorable, and most positive letter of recommendation for them. And then also, picking a major can impact your admission results. You need to understand that, if your child's undecided, that's fine. Last number I saw, I don't know, Debbie, if you've done anything on this, but last number I've seen is 68% of students apply undecided. Have you seen it that high?
I haven't heard an exact number, but it doesn't seem out of line. I mean, the other number is also related to how many students change their major once they're in college.
Well, exactly. 80 that I know. 82% of college freshmen change the major at least once.
Right.
So we know that part. But by saying, well, I don't know, I think I might want to do engineering. that's great, but that could be a much more selective competitive major. So, again, I would reach out to admissions directly and say, listen, at this point, I might be undecided. Don't act like you've had no thought about it at all. Throw out two things. I might be interested in economics, which is in the arts and sciences school, or I might be interested in engineering. Do you have a recommendation on which way I should go? Because I don't want to make admissions more difficult than I need to if I'm not even sure. And or can I, if I don't get accepted to engineering or to finance or to business school or whatever, does that mean I'll get just flat out rejected, or will you offer me admission at another school, another option? So it's very important to kind of have that conversation with admissions if you're on the fence and you're not sure.
And the one other question I would add is that if your child has to apply to a specific school, I would ask admissions, if it turns out that they want to, once they get in, transfer, like what's the difficulty or ease of transferring from one school to another once you're already accepted?
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. From my perspective, I do have my students ask that, but really what I do typically, Debbie, with that is that's more after they get accepted. I have them go to the, before they go to accepted student day, because honestly, that could be a big decision. You're accepted into the School of Business at this school. You're accepted into the economics program in arts and sciences, but that's really your top choice. So then you go and you talk to them and try to, you've already been accepted. I'll come here and I want to come here, but tell me about the flexibility if I change my mind or to get into the business school later. That's a definite criteria. So either way, Debbie, you're right. I would go, even if you bring it up front and you get accepted, I would still have it on the back end, to validate it, but you're absolutely right. That's a very, very important point.
So Sheila has a really good question.
Sure.
Should you feed information to the person, teacher, or someone else who might be writing the letter of recommendation?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Many schools, and at least a lot of the high schools that I work with, have what they call a brag sheet that either the student does and or the parents have to do. And it's a list of anywhere between 4 and I've seen as much as 16, which is crazy, but a lot of questions that you can answer to provide more information to the person that's going to be writing that. If your child's school does not have that, I always have my students send an email to the teacher and just say, hey, thank you so much for writing my letter of recommendation. Please let me know if there's anything you need from me or if there's anything I can provide you to make it easier so you can write a strong letter of recommendation. Worst comes to worst, you offer and they don't take you up on it. Yes, there's resumes that you can provide, but a lot of students don't necessarily have enough significant things to put on a resume. So you could be also proactive and just give a couple updates, just so, especially if you're involved in outside activities that maybe the teacher doesn't know about, again, such as work or outside dance or outside clubs or organizations or Eagle Scouts or Girl Scouts or any of those kind of things.
Or honestly, I've also had my kids send emails to the teacher and kind of highlight what they liked in the class that they took with the teacher. So then it kind of, connects that teacher to the student and kind of how they performed in the class.
Sure.
A teacher can't remember every student and kind of what they did, or so it kind of just brings it up so that what they're writing they'll remember more specifically about that student and how they did in the class.
Absolutely.
So just this is kind of a good question about should it only be a high school? Well, there's 2 parts to this. Should it only be a high school teacher? Can it be somebody besides a teacher that gives a recommendation? And can it be from a teacher that's earlier, like junior high?
Yeah, so no and no. So it should be from a teacher because that's what they're asking for. That's what the Common App and that's what colleges specifically ask for. I try to keep it junior year or earliest sophomore if possible. However, if you have a freshman teacher that's also the contact for Spanish club or something and your child's very involved in it and you've been working with them for 4 years, by all means you can go that route. The outside stuff is something you got to be very, very careful of. I saw a couple of questions pop up. Can it be from a coach, whatever? No, it cannot be from a coach, at least not initially. You can, if your child is deferred or waitlisted, at that point you can go for outside letters of recommendation. But initially, the colleges are typically looking for teachers and guidance to write those.
And what about somebody asked if the teacher happens to just retire, but the student wants.
Yeah, you know, that's very tough. I can't tell you how many times that, how dare they retire, right, Debbie? So, but yeah, so I always say that, you know, in that instance, make sure you get their home email address and make sure you give them a earlier submission due date. You know, I tell everybody, you know, I need it by September 1st. So that way, if for some reason they're not responding to email, and the teachers are just like the rest of us, generally good people, but they're busy. You don't know what's going on in their life. They may not be checking things. It might go to spam. Believe it or not, I know this is crazy also, but some teachers are not necessarily technologically savvy. So they may not even check their email that often. So, you know, I always put an earlier date on it just to make sure that you keep in communication and that they're actually going to be responding and doing it for you. But that's fine to you. If that's a person that you want, there's nothing wrong with that. Admissions strategies, they matter, and they matter big time. So early decision, early action, rolling, honors, ED2, there's all kinds of stuff, but you definitely do need to do your homework. So I'll give you a couple of things here. So number one is I have 2 rules for early decision. Rule number 1 is it has to be, no matter where else your student gets accepted, it has to be their top choice school. Now, you say, well, of course, like why else? Why wouldn't they do it? You know, why would they do it otherwise? Well, believe it or not, some students say, well, you know what? I really want to try to go for this school, but it's a big reach. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get in. But if I early decision at this school, it's probably going to help me a lot more, and it might kind of slam dunk it for me. And then they do it, and then they find out they got into that bigger reach school for them that was supposedly their number 1 choice, and then they're really upset that they did it in the first place. So I really try to encourage my students, don't do it for just admission purposes. Don't have regrets as you go through the process. Really try to make sure that it is your top choice no matter where else you get accepted. Rule number 2 is you have to be willing and ready to write the check. You have to do your financial homework before you apply. It's just like I keep saying, a car, a business, a house. You would never put an offer in on any of those things that you couldn't afford. So definitely have the financial conversation directly, not just on a calculator, but have a direct conversation with admissions and financial aid prior to make sure you understand if it's within your financial affordability range. And then if the answer is yes, you can definitely go forward.
You know, Russ, I'm just going to interrupt for 1 second because I realize from the questions, maybe be a little bit more specific and explain what the difference is about early decision and early action.
Oh, sure. Okay, yes. So early decision, you can only do 1 early decision school at a time. And what I mean by at a time is you'll see also on this slide, there's an ED2, early decision 2. So early decision, not every school offers this, by the way, but if you apply early decision, and you're accepted, you're committing, you're contractually committing. You have to actually sign on the dotted line that you are committing that your student will attend. So you are committing to that school no matter where else they get accepted. That's what early decision is. There's only 1 school at a time that you can do early decision to. Now, why ED2? I'll address that. So let's say your child applies early decision 1 and unfortunately does not get accepted. They're waitlisted, deferred, or God forbid, just outright rejected. At that point, they can apply early decision 2 to another school. Early decision 2 is the same thing. It's 1 school at a time, and it is a commitment to actually attend that school should you be accepted. But early decision 2 is a later date to make that decision and make that submission. So as an example, some schools might have November 1st as ED1, and they may have January 15th as ED2. So there's 2 windows for you to apply. So it becomes a strategy as to which school you apply ED1, ED2, and all those kind of things. Early action is completely different. Early action, for the most part, is just earlier submission of your child's application, and you typically can apply to as many early action schools as you want, and you get earlier notification. Typically, if you apply on November 1st, as an example, you would hear by the middle of December, yes, no, or maybe. And it's really very important to have a couple schools like that, because otherwise, when you have to make a May 1st final decision of your child's senior year and you don't even hear back until April, which unfortunately does happen sometimes, then you're in a panic and you're not going to get to see the school, and how do we make a decision, and does financial aid work, and all those kind of things. So it's always nice to have either an early action, or the next one that we'll talk about in a second is rolling, but it's always nice to have a couple schools there. Early action though can come, it's rare, and I don't want to complicate things, but early action sometimes can come with restriction at certain schools, so you do need to check what their early action policy is, just to make sure. There's restricted, and there's limited, and there's some other things that which they may as well just call it early decision, but
I know.
I don't know why they do that, but not to complicate things. But in general, early action, you can apply to as many schools as you want. It's not always, though, in your child's best interest to apply early action. I will tell you that a lot of times that depends on the school, because if the school is a match or a safety, then by all means, I would say rock on and do the early action, get it in there quick, and hopefully get that one in the bank, and takes the heat off of your student. Like, okay, cool, worst case, I'm going to this school, if everything else doesn't come through. But if it's more of a reach, it's not always to your student's advantage to apply early action. Even though it's not a commitment, you might want to wait and have more grades under your child's belt to, show strength senior year, to have more data points of strength and rigor and accomplishment. So that's a personal preference and a personal choice that a family has to make. Rolling is something where typically, if you are a good candidate, meaning that you're a good match for the school, and you can provide all the information that they request, if you submit early, some schools that lie, believe it or not, but you can apply rolling, and if they have all the information that they need, they can actually give you an admission response within 4 to 6 weeks. So that's a very untimely, like it's not a specific time, but it could be a good strategy for your student to get an early yes, hopefully, before it also could impact if you do it earlier like that, it could impact your early action and your early decision thoughts later on as well. Honors programs, the only point that I want to make here is that, especially now, a lot of schools have separate essays and or separate applications relative to honors.
And separate deadlines.
And separate deadlines, correct. And I'm just going to tell you, I'm telling, not all, but if your student is a decent match for the school they're applying to, especially without ACTs and SATs, I think that colleges are going to have more and more students applying yes to honors this year, at least for consideration. And why the heck not? I would. That's where the money comes from. That's where, there are other entitlements to honors programs. So I've been telling my students, when in doubt, absolutely apply to the honors programs.
So there's a question here about can you apply early action and then decide to apply ED2?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because remember, early action, and by the way, some people do that. I mean, a lot of times what I try to have my students do is a little subset of all this. 1 or 2 rolling schools, that way it takes, you can just see a student's shoulders go nice down and settled once they get into a school and they get a yes, right? Because one of the things, students don't want to admit this to you, but they're a little scared of this process. It's daunting. They don't want to disappoint you. They don't want to disappoint themselves, all those kind of things. So getting a rolling school, and at least to say, again, okay, worst case, I'm going here, I'm going to college, yay, that is a thing. So I think rolling is kind of important. I also definitely usually encourage early action for a certain number of schools. And then again, the early decision depends on the status of the student, the family, financial, and all those kind of things.
So Rebecca asked a question, which is good. If you are rejected early action, can you apply regular admissions? I'm assuming you're asking, can you apply regular admissions to that school?
To the same school.
Yeah.
No, you cannot.
No, yeah.
It's a one shot.
Yeah. So usually out of early action or any of the early decision, early admissions, you could be flat out rejected. You could be deferred, meaning that they're going to throw you into the regular admissions, or you could be accepted. So, but
or waitlisted,
Yeah, will they waitlist early, or isn't that
they can.
Okay, interesting.
Yep. Yeah. So and so it depends on how they are conditionally accepted or not. And also, I did see a question which a lot of people ask: what if you apply early action or early decision, does that preclude you from getting merit scholarships? And the answer is no, it does not. It does depend though on the school. If your child applied early action or early decision and you did not get a merit scholarship, it's not because most likely that you chose early action or early decision. It's either because of the way they handle merit, the way they handle need-based only, or to be honest with you, that your student was not high enough in the application pool to be qualified for it.
So a good question to clarify, what's the difference between rolling admissions and regular admissions? Are they the same? Maybe it wasn't clear about deadlines.
Yep. Yeah, so notice we didn't put regular admissions in here, right? So because regular is definitely different from rolling. Regular is typically much later, and it's also much later. It's no obligation. You can apply to as many schools as you want, and it's also though later notification. And that's really where kind of some of the uncertainty comes in. I try to minimize that uncertainty for clients. I don't want my students waiting until April to finally get accepted to 3 or 4 of their schools, and now they're scrambling in 3 weeks to make a final decision. So that's why I think you want to parse it out a little bit across these different admission strategies.
And another good question about, can you only apply to honors programs like if you've been in honors classes in high school? Like there's not necessarily a connection between being in honors classes and applying to the honors program.
No. Honors programs are typically your most competitive, most rigorous, most highly achieved students. It depends on the school, but anywhere between the top 5 to 10% of applicants across the whole applicant pool. So it's usually the students with the highest GPA, the highest ACT, SAT score if they have one, and also the most rigorous classes. So very different from honors classes in high school.
Okay.
So we had some questions, and we've talked a little bit about this. I don't know, Debbie, as far as the first one, the AP versus dual enrollment. I mean, there is a difference. Dual enrollment is typically something where you're taking a college level class, a lot of times at a college campus, but nowadays, I guess you can also do it online a lot too. But it's where you're actually getting college credits. So there is a difference. AP classes, you are not necessarily going to get or receive college credits. Both though, whether it's dual enrollment or AP, you have to remember, it is at the college's discretion as to whether or not they're going to accept them and whether or not they're going to actually give you some kind of credit for them at the college your child's accepted to. Was there more to that one, Deb?
No, I think that was it. Just kind of a better understanding.
Is there an early decision, early action advantage? Yes, I think I kind of hit on that, but I think especially right now, colleges are hurting. They have taken, a lot of them have taken, $1 million hits or more as a result of what's going on with this whole pandemic. So I actually do think that more colleges are probably going to take on more early action, early decision students, especially early decision where you have to commit, than they have in the past. And you'll find a lot of early decision colleges actually already receive or accept 50, 60, 70% of their students early decision. And now I think it might be even higher just to make sure that they secure people and secure the revenue. So there is a potential advantage, but you have to do your homework. Again, it depends on what kind of match your child is to those schools as well, because you don't want to disadvantage your student. And again, the more of a reach the school is, the more potential that it might sometimes be better to be in a regular admission pool. Test optional, test prep on send-in current scores. That's a whole, wow, that's a big one. So test optional, I believe, I've said this before, that if your student has a test to provide and they are in the 50 percentile or greater, then they can consider submitting the scores versus going test optional. Now, again, that's a guideline. It does depend on the school. It depends on a lot of different things. I would not say that for a more selective school. I think you need to be much higher than that, to be in the 75 percentile, I think, in my opinion. But so it does depend on the school, but don't be afraid to apply test optional, because it's not there to hurt you. And at this point, a lot of students are going to need to take advantage because they either haven't tested at all, or they were hoping to do better and they just haven't had the chance. As far as test prep is concerned, you know, that's a loaded question. I told you what I did. I mean, what I did with my own daughter, she did not test. She took a couple practice tests and she was ready, and she's had 3 tests canceled on her. At this point, I told her to just forget it. We're not spending the time, we're not spending the money, we're not spending the effort, we're not stressing about it, we're not getting into the whirlwind that so many people are getting into with it. That was her choice, though, because also, and just, you know, full disclosure, my daughter is not, she's a very good student. She's an honor society, all that, you know, good stuff. She's taking APs and all that stuff, but she's not, you know, into the highly selective schools. She's not that concerned about that. She's found schools that are truly, she's listened to my advice, and that are truly, you know, a good match for her on other criteria. Yes, academic, but on other things. So in her instance, she, yes, has a couple of slight reaches, but for the most part, her list, you know, with her GPA, with the types of classes she's taken, they should be decent matches for her. She should have several decent options going through the process. So I don't feel personally in her situation that her taking a test or not is going to be significant enough to impact her admission decision. But, you know, that is a personal decision. I do think for those of you who have this option, if your high school is providing an option to take a test in your high school, I honestly think that's the best potential for it to actually happen. I don't know that it will, but if your high school is providing that, I would definitely register for that and assume and plan as if that's going to happen. However, again, you know, this Saturday is supposed to be a bunch of tests, and one by one across the board, they're being canceled all over, at least here in New Jersey and a lot of places in New York, and also other states that we have, you know, concierge members for. And then I already told you about this. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a question that was earlier and also coming up. What if your child, they already sent in their test scores? Maybe they, you know, took them early. Maybe somebody mentioned they took them last year and they already sent them in. Now that school has gone, there's a few layers to this question. Now that school has gone test optional, is there any way to tell the school to disregard them, or because or, you know, basically that, you know, or is there any way to kind of get them back?
Well, yeah, I mean, first off, you haven't submitted your application yet. So you can definitely, you know, click the option of no, you do not want your test scores considered for admission. But I would reach out to admissions directly with that as well and let them know, say, hey, you know what, I sent these scores a little prematurely, but I did on the application, or I plan to check no. I just want to make sure that you disregard that, or is there anything I need to do in addition to make sure that that's what you do relative to my admission decision.
And what about if students haven't been able to test, but they have PSAT scores?
Yeah, no, to my knowledge, I don't know of any school that's going to accept PSAT scores or any kind of practice test. I mean, my daughter took 2 full practice tests at a testing center, but I don't know of it. And she did ask if they would accept them, and they said no. So I don't believe, I'm not aware of any schools that will accept anything other than a formal PSAT or SAT.
Okay, so go on to AP scores, because the next
AP
question
scores,
is
send in or not. So first off, you don't need to send them. You could actually self-report them on the Common App. You could also self-report them on the Coalition app, and you could probably do that on a bunch of things. The question is whether or not you actually report them. And typically, and again, this does depend on the schools or types of schools that your student is applying to. If they are a more selective school, I would not submit it if the score is anything less than a 4. I would submit 4s and 5s only. If your child's applying to schools, then they're not all reaches and not, highly selective, highly competitive, you can consider a 3, 4, or 5. I would definitely not self-report anything that's below a 3. And honestly, in most instances, it's not even the student's fault that they're below a 4, to be honest. I think, a lot of times that falls on the teacher, to be honest with you, other than, test anxiety or they didn't really study or, they were, God forbid, ill as they took the test or something. But again, I think you want to, if you're going to submit, or I shouldn't say submit, if you're going to report AP scores, you want it to position your student favorably. And I really think a 4 or a 5 is the best way to do that. And then last thing, interviews. Oh, do not wait to be contacted. Absolutely not. Go onto the website, reach out to admissions and find out what their process is. Find out how you can do it. Absolutely. I would be all over that. A lot of schools are actually offering Zoom calls with admissions people more and more right now than I've ever seen because of the lack of ability to visit, because of the lack of ability to test. So I would definitely, absolutely, every school that your child can interview at, they should try. And even if they don't find it on the website or it's not currently offered, I would be calling admissions to find out. But interview from a demonstrated interest perspective to kind of put a name and a face together, I have to say like that networking thing still counts and still matters to some degree. So I would absolutely schedule interviews. Do not wait to be, if they tell you we only do it after you submit your application, and either contact us or we will contact you if we want to interview you, or if it's picked randomly or whatever, that's fine. But don't assume that. Make sure you hear that directly from admissions before you make that assumption.
Okay, and what about the question about who should call to ask these questions? Should the parent call admissions? Is that a complete no-no, or should it all come from the student?
Okay, so it's so funny, Debbie, we're asked this all the time, right? So okay, the student calls, the student emails. The only thing you as a parent ever contact the school about is financial aid. Because assuming that a student is going to be able to have an intelligent conversation about financial aid is absolutely ridiculous. So from a financial aid perspective, you as a parent, you take the lead on that, you make the phone calls, and you do all what you need to do. You do your due diligence and get your questions answered the way you need to. Everything that is not financial aid related, absolutely 100% needs to come from the student.
And what about, there's a question, in this, we're saying this is the right time for a parent to call and ask about finances for early decisions. So you mentioned, bringing the net price calculator. Don't sometimes they also, and maybe it depends on school, they'll do an early read on
Yes.
your finances?
Yeah, and again, it won't be a commitment and they're not going to sign off on it. However, yes, you can request what they call an early read from the college that you're considering applying early decision. And that is where they actually go through. It's kind of like an early read when a student gets an early read from an admissions perspective. A lot of athletes get that. Just to make sure that they're not wasting their time on a recruit, right? So from a financial aid perspective, you absolutely can ask for that. Not all schools do it, and they will caveat it left and right, saying this is not a commitment, but you can have the conversation about it as well. And also, by the way, you definitely, when you do that kind of thing and any homework you do on financial aid, I think I mentioned this before, but it's worth saying again, you don't just talk to financial aid, you talk to financial aid and admissions. Because at every college, they can handle financial aid differently. Sometimes financial aid is purely the forms. Other times financial aid is the forms and need-based aid only. All merit goes through admissions. And sometimes financial aid has everything. So it depends on who manages which purse strings at each college. And unfortunately, you can't just assume it's the same at every school. So you should talk to both. All right, so a couple of summarization things here. So remember, say this before, but the college list drives everything, as I always say. Ability to get admitted, affordability, and the process as far as when to apply, what work needs to be done, and all those kind of things. The college essay, as I said, is different from an English class essay. It doesn't mean they can't do it in an English class, but it doesn't have to have an anecdote. It doesn't have to follow certain rules. It doesn't have to, it can be in the third person. It can be however creative they want to make it. And standing out that way, assuming it's well done, is definitely suggested all the time. Supplemental essays are key, especially this year. Again, I understand it's tough. All we've done is virtual tours and all that kind of thing, but your student should be taking notes from some of those things. Look for things that really stand out. Don't regurgitate every single thing, but pick something that's very significant, that they learn, that's special, that matches their interest, their experience, their activities that they've been involved in, any of those kind of things, and use that. Early decision, early action can be provided, definitely provide an admissions edge, as we discussed. And just remember, SAT, ACT optional does not necessarily mean that it's easier to get admitted. There are a lot of strategies you're going to need to implement and think about as you go through that process. So talking about finishing applications, which is what we're doing tonight, and actually finishing them could be a little overwhelming and stressful. I'm sure I've seen several of you who've been kind enough to have your video open or having a cocktail, glass of wine. I don't blame you. And when you talk about college, that probably drives you to do that more so. I understand that. And I'm right there with you. Not tonight, but usually. Anyway, I get it. But it can be stressful and overwhelming. Try to, like I said, try to keep the right perspective on things. Don't follow the herd. Do what's right for you, your family, and your student, and try to keep things in perspective and try to just break it down. Even if you feel very behind right now, just get your student and you to start on one part of the process and just chip away at it. So, are we ready? Are we ready to submit applications? Everybody's ready to rock and roll now? You're all ready to go? You're going to talk to your child now at 9:30, whatever heck time it is right now, and get them to go? No, probably not. But remember, again, college is selective. Even the ones that your child thinks is a safety, there's a lot of great schools out there. So please make sure that you have a good subset and you're using the right criteria, which means, again, you have to check out and look at what your criteria is and are from an academic, social, and financial perspective, and do your homework to make sure your students list matches that. Some schools have additional essays. Did you write them? Can you write them? Do you know what to say? Definitely, absolutely make sure that they do that, and make sure, again, that could be a huge differentiator. The next one sounds crazy, but you have to look over your students' common application and whatever they submit before they submit it. There is an option on the Common App, review and submit. You can print it out and you can look at it in its entirety, look at all that information. You definitely need to do that. Don't say, accept your child saying, I got it, I'm done, I don't need to. No, you're paying, I would assume. So before you pay anything, before you give the credit card, make sure you find any mistakes that might be there. Did you receive enough support and guidance? I'm not sure. If not, the squeaky wheel sometimes gets the oil. My daughter's high school knows me pretty well, unfortunately for them, because they haven't answered a lot of my questions and they give the canned response, we'll do it in October, which is not acceptable to me. So don't be afraid to be that squeaky wheel. Don't take no for an answer, and make sure that you're on your timeline and agenda, not your high schools. So again, just a little summation of, rolling admissions. You can actually start applying there now. Gave you some early action and early decision dates, but remember, those are not, the only ones. They are college and school specific. Honors programs and special scholarships. If you're not sure about it, ask admissions, try to find out and see what those deadlines are as well. And, allow a minimum of 2 to 3 months, it usually says, to do that. That's, we may not have that at this time. We're kind of just pushing up against it, which is why we're calling this a sprint, not to create anxiety, but to create a little bit more of a sense of urgency. So, Deb, I don't know if you want to take over on this part.
Yeah, we do these sessions kind of periodically, as deadlines get closer, we do them more often. If you got information that's enough from this session, that is great. I already saw a lot of people say thank you. We love doing this. We're trying to share as much as possible. If you hopefully get on our newsletter, there's information there. So, we're glad that this was helpful. There are people who want a little bit more. And so we usually, everything that we come out with, that we offer to people, it's based on people asking us, so we see that they have a need, or people ask, can I get this little extra help? And then we kind of come up with, well, what's a way that we can deliver it, and what's a way that it can be affordable? Because that's what we're all about, is like, how can we offer you something that's you know, affordable and that can really meet your needs, and that you get the information that you want. There were a ton of questions on here, which are great. We can't answer them all. Some of them are very specific to your situation. We get it. And so we're trying to find a way to kind of give you a lot of the information and also give you the chance to ask some specific questions that relate to your situation. So we're calling this the Senior Sprint Series, and it's going to be 4 sessions, an hour and a half each, which is a lot of information. And but they're going to be broken down into 45 minutes of kind of Russ going through kind of what you need to know about that topic, and then 45 minutes of Q&A. So you come with your great questions, and you will get the chance to answer it. Russ will get the chance to ask it. Russ will answer it. The other thing is you will hear other people's questions, which sometimes are actually really beneficial because it triggers, you know, some things that you hadn't thought about. So this is, I mean, for anybody who kind of has more questions than what we can answer tonight, you know, this is a great way of kind of, you know, this is a little bit of last minute, but to kind of get your arms around the process and making sure that you've gotten everything covered. So the one thing that we didn't list here is that we're going to actually limit it to 40 people because of that 45-minute Q&A session. We want to make sure that people can get their questions answered. So we're not trying to make this huge. We just want to, you know, give people the opportunities if they haven't started and they feel like they're a little nervous and they want more information and they, you know, want to know that they're on the right track or they haven't missed anything, plus they need to get their specific questions answered. This is a great opportunity to do that.
So Debbie, what we're going to be doing in each of these sessions, so these are the main things that you need to get done before your child hits the submit button, okay? But what we're going to do during these sessions is the first 45 minutes, like build your perfect college list. I'm going to talk about what you need to do to make sure you have identified the right reaches, matches, and safeties. Use the right criteria. Make sure you're on the right track to actually achieve the admission goals you're looking for. For college essay essentials, I'm going to go through samples, do's and don'ts. I'm going to answer your questions too on, you know, my daughter's thinking about writing about this. Does this make sense? Should we do that? Should we change it? Common App, I'm going to show you the typical mistakes that people make and also answer a bunch of your questions on that. And then also make sure we talk about financial aid questions and things of that nature. The reason I wanted to make sure that we kept it to no more than 40 is because I wanted to be this kind of a conversation, but then very interactive with 45 minutes of individuals. So if you have a question, Russ, my student is a 3.6 student and has SAT or doesn't, or this is their SAT and is applying to these 5 schools. What do you think is the probability? Are we on target here? Are we off? You know, should we expect to receive some kind of financial aid? You know, it gets to that level of granularity, hopefully, on these calls, if you're willing to share. So it's this, but it's kind of a hybrid and very low priced option for direct one-on-one, what I maybe call it, or a hybrid of one-on-one type counseling for an incredibly reasonable price. So that's why we don't want to have, this was great. I think we had over 300 people at one point. You know, we don't want it to be that way because there's no way we can give the right attention to 300 people. We want to cap it at 40. We've done this kind of thing before. We've been very successful with it. We know we can manage 40, and we know that we can give you the personal service that you and answer your personal questions you'd be looking for. So that's why we were looking to do it and keep it at a limit like this.
You know, we're gonna try and end enrollment next, I think the 30th is next Sunday, because a few days after that, we're gonna start these sessions. So
first session is September 2nd on a Wednesday night. They're gonna be on Wednesday nights, 8:30 Eastern. And it's going to be every 2 weeks. So it starts on the 2nd and it's going to be every 2 weeks. So even after we go through this whole process, you still have more time to finalize things and complete things before the most likely November 1st deadlines.
And just a tiny incentive, if anybody wants to, you know, kick this off and join tonight. We have an essay helper guide, which is actually really phenomenal. I don't know, Russ, if you want to give a little bit more detail about it, because we gave it away. We did a session on essays, and we gave it away then. And I think some people who didn't get it were a little upset.
Right. So no, it's sample essays, it's brainstorming exercises that are in there. It's also suggestions on how to be efficient through the process. So it actually has been very helpful. And I have to tell you, it's funny. I've kind of, hopefully you're not gonna be mad at me. I've made a couple of exceptions with a couple of people that really wanted it. And I sent it to them and they all said, oh my gosh, this is so helpful. I love this. This is great. So yeah, the essay helper is something that is very, very, it's a big help to get kids to start thinking about what they should and shouldn't be writing about.
And along those lines, we just, again, we kind of break things down to make it easy to meet whatever your needs are. If you want to do the senior sprint, or maybe you feel like I can handle it, but my kid just needs some help with essays, we've broken out these different options of how Russ can help with essays. We've actually been doing this now for like a month, gotten like a lot of people through the process already. A lot of the more popular ones are to help my kid with brainstorming, or both the combination of brainstorming and then reviewing the essay afterwards. So the whole point of this is we break it down, you get the option, you could pick, which one of these is going to be most helpful. Again, trying to be as reasonable as possible. And because we know, in addition to all the applications, and essays are a part of it, but essays are probably one of the most stressful parts of this process.
Absolutely. And just to be a little bit more granular on this and specific, option A, B, and D all include a 20 to 30 minute Zoom session that your student and or you both schedule and with me, and we go through either the essay draft they have, or we go and I actually did 2 brainstorming sessions today, Debbie, where the student had no idea and we came up with really great ideas. Now they're all psyched about writing their essay, which is kind of cool. So depending, option A is, I have no idea what to write about, but I want to brainstorm with you, Russ, please help me out to find something. And then option B is, I have a draft, am I on target? Is there something in here I can use? Is there some way to make it better? Option C is, all right, I don't really need to talk to you, Russ, but I'd be really interested to hear if I'm on track or not. And I send a Loom of my assessment where I share the screen and I actually go through what my comments are. I highlight things in red and blue as to yes, no, and then sometimes yellow for maybe. And I give my perspective on things, and you receive that recording back. It's usually anywhere between 6 and 9 minutes of my commentary and suggestions on how to optimize their essay, make sure they're on track. So that's kind of what it is, and it's been incredibly well received thus far. I'm not aware of anything that you could possibly get for this kind of a price. Could you find maybe an English tutor that might be willing to do it, for $50 an hour, maybe? And if you can and you trust them, by all means, then do what you want to do, and that's great. We just want you to get the help you need. But the senior sprint and this essay helper are things that our clients and our members of Road to College and Paying for College 101 have been looking for and asking for, and a lot of people were not able to find it, and we weren't able to find people that are willing to provide it at these kind of prices. So we decided we would take a shot at it. And like I said, so far it's been very, very well received.
And my mistake, I actually put the wrong link at the bottom, but I put it in the chat. If anybody's interested in the essay options, it's roadtocollege.com/essay help. But I'm sure you'll find it if you go to the website anyhow.
And by the way, if you don't need it, that's great. I mean, if this is not all that you need, then we're happy with that too. So, yep. So we know it could be a little scary. Hopefully not like this. But some of you may have felt like that. But obviously, and if you want to go to the next slide, what we're aiming for is this, right? So we would like to, and again, a lot of what I do a lot of times is talking students and or parents off the ledge sometimes, as I say. At a minimum, I think the senior sprint is going to provide you that peace of mind. Like I always say, at a minimum, it's an insurance policy to make sure that you're not making the big mistakes, that you're on the right track, and you're optimizing your potential to get the results you want. So if this, I so appreciate all the positive feedback I've seen so far in this. That's really great. We're really happy that you enjoy this and that you found it helpful. And by the way, if none of this other stuff interests you, no problem. I think, Debbie, you do a follow-up just to give the information if they missed it or if they want to.
Yep. And somebody asked, just to clarify, the essays are not connected to the senior sprint. You don't have to take the senior sprint to take any of the essays. These are
Totally
just like, it's
exclusive.
all a la carte. It's kind of like whatever is going to help you the most.
Right, whatever works. Yeah, and that's what we want to do. It actually makes it more difficult for us, but it's more user friendly for all of you. So that way, if you need it. So we wish everybody the best of luck. Most importantly, we hope everybody stays healthy and safe. A lot of stuff going on this between now and November 1st-ish. So we wish you all the best of luck with that, a very successful process. And even if you don't want any of the paid services, do look for other things that Road to College, Paying for College, hosts, because we're all just trying to help you get through this very uncertain and potentially stressful time. So
yeah, just be on the lookout. Actually, in September, beginning of October, there'll be some more Facebook Lives. I'll just tell you one off the bat. I have a Facebook Live with an author called Jeff Salingo. He has a book coming out. He's a New York Times bestseller, writes all about education, and he's going to explain his book, but also a piece of it. It's all about, obviously, admissions, and he spent a whole year watching the admissions process. So I think that will be really worthwhile. And then we're working on a webinar in October, and some people asked something about these questions, to actually teach parents what to look for, so that when they know whether, to dig into a college's financial health. So that's a big issue this year. May not have been in past years, and there are clues to kind of, make you feel either nervous or more comfortable about what's going to happen with the college over the next few years. So be on the lookout.
That's awesome. That's great. I wasn't even aware of those. That's great.
I know, those are new. Yeah. Okay, everybody. Thank you. And you'll get the recording. And hopefully, I think this was helpful for you. And as always, reach out if you've got any questions, and we will try our best to help.
Yellowstone time. Have a good night, everybody.
Okay. Good night.